So, what's your name? Abdullah. How you doing? You good? You good? Start. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وزد على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد صلاة تفتح لنا بها أبواب الرضا والتيسير وتغلق بها أبواب الشر والتعسير أنت مولانا فنعم المولى ونعم النصير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Next 45 minutes, inshallah, we'll talk about how to maximize health during Ramadan. All I want you to do is just absorb as much as you can some of these conversations, because it's going to be a bit of a culture shock for a lot of you. So you're not going to like me, but that's okay. Sometimes the doctor has to give an injection. It's for your benefit. Okay, if we go to the next slide, please. Just one thing before we start. Do not change anything if you have a medical condition or you're on medication without speaking to your doctor. Is that okay? Because you can get this wrong if you don't do it with advice with your doctor. Is that okay? Okay, next slide, inshallah. So first things first, when it comes to Ramadan, we see it as a month of endless iftars and feasts and samosas and fried foods and stuff like that. And what happens is that sometimes, actually most of the time, what happens is that some foods that we have, we only see them during Ramadan and we don't see them for the rest of the year. And the reason why that happens is because, unfortunately, we culturally, and it's not necessary that it's just Indo-Pak, it's Muslims across the globe, we've turned Ramadan into a festival. And it's really important that that's an important starting point, that Ramadan is not a festival at all. And that's the starting point. And Ramadan is a month of ibadah. Allah says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. That the purpose of fasting that's been prescribed for you, it was prescribed for people before you, yani, all our traditions of the prophets that have gone before us, they've all had, every single one has had the concept of fasting. And the reason why it was prescribed is because primarily is to reach a state of taqwa. And so there's a secret here that abstaining from food, drink, and sexual relations with your married spouse, there's a secret in that. What does that do? When you starve the nafs, it inculcates towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. In other words, if you feed the nafs, then it distances itself from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the primary purpose of Ramadan is to enter a state of taqwa. Now, ulama have explained what taqwa is. It has many meanings. It's just impossible to translate it into English. But Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh gives a beautiful summary. He says, taqwa is to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taqwa is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and never forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And taqwa is to be in a state of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and never be in a state of ingratitude. And that's amalgamated in taqwa. So it's important to understand that actually this is the starting point of Ramadan, that is to gain taqwa. And the one thing that you notice about people who have been really successful in their life, whatever sphere that is in their life, whether it's with their finances, their career, their job, their school, their studies, their relationship, you name it, their body, they have one thing in common, and that's called self-discipline. What does that mean to you when I say that, discipline? What comes to your mind? That notion of discipline. Consistency. What else? Control. That's a big one. That's huge. Yeah. So it's actually a really positive concept, having self-discipline. So when a human being is disciplined with what they eat, what they don't eat, what they do, what they don't do, who they talk to, who they don't talk to, who they chill with, who they don't chill with, sleep, how much they choose not to sleep. And these are important questions. When they have self-discipline in their life, khalas, that's when you see success. And that's what Ramadan is really, really about. So we're going to focus on food and how to optimize health over the next 30, 40 minutes. Next slide. Let me give you a history lesson. Okay, 100 years ago, what was the commonest cause of death globally? Not top, right at the top. What was the cause of death? Disease. Yes, infectious disease. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave human beings the tawfiq to develop antibiotics, antivirals, and vaccinations. And it's proven, you can't deny it, it's saved billions of lives. So what's the commonest cause of death in the Western world now? Cardiovascular disease. So cardiovascular disease, anything to do with circulation. So think heart attacks, think strokes. About a quarter of deaths in this country is because of cardiovascular disease. Right now, today, Unfortunately, 480 people have died because of cardiovascular disease, either heart attack or stroke today. 480 every day. 480 people die. Every 3 minutes, somebody's admitted into hospital in this country because of cardiovascular disease. Every 5 minutes, somebody has passed away. It's a terrible statistic, isn't it? 50% of those who have a cardiovascular disease, heart attacks and strokes, 50% of them have high blood pressure. 10% are obese. And those who have diabetes, which is about 6 million people in this country, and 1 million people don't know they've got it. They're just walking around and they don't know they've got it. But if you have diabetes, you have a 2 to 3-fold increase in developing a cardiovascular disease. If you live in the north of England, there's a 47% increase of developing cardiovascular disease compared to south. And if you're Asian, man, good luck. It's terrible, okay? And if you look at like our statistics, about nearly 50% of us are overweight, 40% of our children are overweight, less than 40% of Asians, they don't have their 5 fruit and veg, a day, and 30% of only 30% of Asians do exercise more than 150 minutes a week, which means 70% don't do exercise basically. So all these statistics, they're terrible statistics, and they point towards why the Western world is struggling with this. So it's a really important conversation to have. Next slide, please. The question really is why are we so sick? The commonest cause of death in the Western world for an adult is heart disease or stroke. You know what the commonest cause of death is for someone who's between the age of 20 to 34 in this country, male or female? Another wild guess, Abdullah. The commonest cause of death? Suicide. And not only are we sick, we're really sad. We're really, really sad. Why is that important? Never in human history have we had so much money, wealth, disposable wealth, freedoms, choices. Yeah, I mean, you and I could sit here right now, swipe right, and get a pizza delivered. Agreed? We could, couldn't we? Right now, one of us, if we're bored listening to me, we can go to the back, go on Skyscanner and book a holiday. The other side of the world in an instant. Agreed? Buy a car, you can buy a house online, you can do all sorts in an instant. But why are we so sick and why are we so miserable? It's diseases that weren't in existence over 100 years ago. But this is the question. Next slide, please. So it boils down to this analogy. If this was your car first thing in the morning, how would you feel physically? Physically, how would you feel? Now, psychologically, you'd feel sad, but physically, how would you feel? What would your energy levels be like? Terrible. You'd feel a bit achy just looking at that thing, wouldn't you? I don't want to go. I don't want to get in that thing, right? Go to the next slide, please. What if Allah gave you one of these babies? How would you feel? Like physically, you'd feel top of the world. Psychologically, you'd feel good, okay? This is the bit where everybody's face lights up when I put this slide on. Allah give you one each, inshallah. And this is the one time where people engage and say, Amen, inshallah. Allah give you 2 each. So if Allah gave you one of these, you'd feel good. Okay, next slide, please. But the reality is that our body is our engine. Our body is our engine. So if you go back 2 slides, please. We have a choice of either having that as our body, or next slide, or one of these as our body. Okay, next slide. And the next one. Now there's 6 elements. Well, lifestyle doctors, they say 5. I put a 6th one in, my masala, and you'll be able to work out which one's which. Next one. So the right at the top is really important that we have a rich, nutritious diet that's with real foods. And I'll break that down in detail. Next slide. That's number 1. Number 2, have to be physically active. There's no ifs or buts. You look at people who are mazboot, who are strong, who are fit and well. You ask them, do you exercise? The answer is yes. Do they have the same amount of hours in the day as us? Of course they do. What's the difference? It's a must for them. It's a must. So like if you want to be in good shape, you have to be physically active. And it's not a lot. It's 150 minutes a week, which is 21 minutes and 40 seconds a day. If you don't have 20 minutes in the day, wake up 10 minutes earlier, go to sleep 10 minutes later, and then you've got your 20 minutes in the day to do it. It's really, really simple. If you want something even better to try and help you gain time, I'm only saying this for the barak, I'm not saying this to show off, but look at my phone. Here's my phone. I've never had a smartphone. Inshallah, I hope I never have one. Okay, but I have bags of hours and time in my day. Bags of time in my day. Do you know how much time is lost on devices? Wasted time on devices? The average child spends 6 hours a day on their phone. The average adult spends 8 hours a day on their phone. 56 minutes of those 8 hours are spent in work. In other words, they're doing work. They're on their phone. 1 hour a day is lost productivity at home. If we're not careful, by the time we hit 60 years old, we would have spent 5 years and 4 hours on our phone doing literally nothing. Kills your time, destroys your time, actually. Biggest thief. So if you want time in your day, get rid of, and you have your own brain, you have your own headspace as well. It's wonderful not having one. So physical activity is really, really important. Next slide, please. And then mental health. We've talked about this before in Masjid Ashrafiyya. Really important to have solid emotional regulation. It's okay to have emotions. Allah's made us that way. We have emotions. It's natural. Nothing wrong with that. But the important thing is to actually control those emotions. The Sahaba were sat with the Prophet, the male Sahaba, and the Prophet asked them, "Who's the strongest from amongst you?" And when men were men, they said, "Well, the one who can floor the other." And the Prophet said, "That's not the strongest. The strongest is the one who can control his anger." What was the Messenger of Allah trying to say? What he was saying was, a message that he was giving us is that the man who can control, because anger is the hardest emotion to control. If you can control anger, you can probably control every single emotion that you're faced with. So the Prophet was saying, whoever can control their anger, that's what you call strength, and that's what you call a man. So realizing that they've got an emotion can lead to negative consequences, but being able to control it is a sign of a man. That's essentially emotional regulation. So I've got patients who are really physically strong. Diet is solid. Gym, nearly every other day. Tough guys, but emotionally they're a mess. But they'll never feel like they're in their element. So you can't detach these factors. They all encompass. They have to be encompassed together to be an element. Next slide, please. The next one is sleep. At least 7 to 8 hours a day. Doesn't matter how you do it. Just make sure you get a decent amount of sleep. And if you don't get it at night, catch up during the day. That's why we have a qaylula, siesta. Really, really important. Next slide, please. Obvious one. Tell all my patients, whatever state you're in, stop smoking, no drinking, zero alcohol, no vaping. 1/3 of vapes have got so much nonsense in there. We don't even know half the stuff that's in there. And some of them are cannabis, THC. So vaping is a big problem. And then the other one is obviously drugs. So like these things are designed to make you feel rubbish. They're designed to ruin your body. Just stay away from them. Next slide, please. And then this is my masala. So basically, to be in one's element, really, really important to have hear what I'm saying carefully, really important to have a loving, living, meaningful relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your religion. A loving, living, in other words, it's not just a mechanical thing. I'm going to pray now and that's it. I'm going to read Quran now and that's it. Like your 24 hours of your day, you're engaging with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every moment is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Loving, living, meaningful. That it's not a transaction between you and God. Allah, I'm going to do this, so I want this car. Allah, I'm going to do this, so I want to get this job. That's child's play. But to have a loving, living, meaningful relationship with Allah, because you look at people who do, that's when they're in their element. And if that's missing in our life, our attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is missing. We have holes. And what's the nature of a human being? How do we plug holes? With nonsense. We're going to self-sabotage mode and try and fill it with things that we think will create happiness, but it's temporal. It's not long term. And so that's the key actually, is to find out what's the gap between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do those 6 things, inshallah, you'll be in your element, inshallah. Next slide, please. So this is the problem. Like we all recognize this, don't we? Like this is us. This is us. We just can't stop eating. One of Dr. David Unwin, who's a huge influence on my practice. He when I met him, first thing he said to me, he said, your Prophet Muhammad, he said his diet is super healthy. I've looked at his diet, super healthy diet. It's the way to be. And what he said in one of his introductions to a recipe book, he said, we're eating ourselves to illness. We as human beings, we are eating ourselves to illness. But he said, there's hope. We can eat ourselves out of illness. We can what? So food can either be poison, harm, or it could be medicine for us. And that's how we've got to look at it. Okay, next slide, please. The problem is we'll come to the problem in a second. There's generally 3 macronutrients in foods, okay? Generally. Proteins, fats, which can be healthy, unhealthy, and carbohydrates. Okay, that's generally the 3 macronutrients. Western diet is very high on carbohydrates. Breakfast, what do we usually have for breakfast? Say again? Toast, yeah, so bread, carbohydrates, what else? Cereals, carbohydrates. There are 2 big ones, aren't they, what we have for breakfast? It's just standard, okay? Lunch, Typically, what would we have? Sandwiches, bread, it's carbohydrate. What? What else? Rice, yep, carbohydrate. What else? Pasta on the go, carbohydrates. You see where it was going? In the evening, what do we have? Chapati, carbohydrate. Rice, carbohydrate. Aloo, carbohydrate. You see, it's really dense carbohydrate. Okay, hold on to this notion. Next slide, please. And then this is the other problem. 56% of our diet is processed or ultra-processed chemicalized food. 56% of our diet. Why is this important? Two reasons. If a human being has a diet that's only 30% processed or ultra-processed, chemicalized, just rubbish basically, takeaways, oven foods, microwave foods, etc., etc., just 30% is in our diet, the increased risk of cancer goes to 20%. Allah save us. The other thing is all these chemicals, they weren't designed, like, remember, the way Allah designed our body was to deal with real foods. Chemicals, the body wasn't designed to deal with chemicals. So the body doesn't know what to do with it. So what does it do? Sucks it all into the liver. I don't know how to break this down. Converts it to fats. Where do fats go? In places we don't like. And you see how the problem's compounded? Okay? And unfortunately, what the Muslims are falling into is this constant, Hazrat Yusuf Rahimullah used to call it aish. That concept of aish. How would you translate that? Mawli Habib? Aish? Huh? Yeah, that's what it leads to. It's constant, just wanting to live well. Eat out all the time, make sure I'm having the best time of my life. At what consequence? And just medically, massive consequences. Next slide, please. So what happens is, if you just imagine we have for breakfast toast, right? Let's just say I got white bread, 2 toasts with a cup of tea. Okay, bread comes from a grain. It's carbohydrate by default. 1 slice of white bread has got the equivalent of, so when I have that toast, 1 slice of toast, I'm digesting it. Every single carbohydrate is converted into glucose. Okay, it's released into the bloodstream. 1 slice of white bread has got the equivalent of 3.7 teaspoons of sugar. Just 1. Would you put 4 teaspoons of sugar on your bread? Never, right? So I've had that, and then what happens usually, normally, digested, converted to glucose. Glucose levels go up. That famous hormone, insulin, released from the pancreas, goes up to get the sugar levels down. First 20, 30, 40, if you're lucky, 50 years of our life, it does it fine. You eat something like you have rice, goes up, insulin goes up, glucose goes down. It works really, really well. But what happens when you get to a stage in your life where what happens is you have that slice of toast again for breakfast, you've been having it for 30 years. Glucose levels go up, insulin levels go up to get the glucose down, but the glucose doesn't go down as well as it should. The reason why that happens is because the glucose needs to go into cells, like muscle, organ, brain, cells for energy. There's a receptor, imagine that's like a door. The door has to open for the glucose to go in. Insulin is the key to open that door. So what happens, the insulin, that key ain't working. It's not working anymore. So the doors aren't opening. So there's lots of glucose still flying around in your blood cell. Okay, high levels of glucose will kill you. So what does the body do? It secretes more insulin to get the same levels of glucose down. Now look at this slide. Every time we eat, we have insulin spikes because we have foods that are high in carbohydrate. If that carbohydrate is not burnt off within 20 minutes, as the window is very short, then 2 things happen. Insulin does 2 things. It converts those sugars into fats. And then, like I said, it goes in places we don't like. Second thing insulin does is a growth hormone. So existing fat cells, the higher levels of insulin, what it does, it causes our fat cells to increase in size. And you see how this perpetuates if you have 3 meals a day that are high in carbs. In other words, the more insulin you secreted, the more fat forms. The other thing about insulin is that it's a hunger hormone. The real hunger hormone is called ghrelin. So when we're full, leptin is released to tell you to stop. When we're genuinely hungry, ghrelin is released to tell us that we're hungry. A human being who's accustomed to just eating when they're not hungry, those 2 hormones are like, I forget you, bro, man. You're not even listening to me. I ain't going to bother with you anymore. So you actually lose the whole concept of when am I hungry, when am I full? Then insulin kicks in. So when insulin levels are high, it tells the brain you're hungry when you're not. You're full. So then what do you do when you think you're hungry? What's the reflex? You just eat, even though you're not hungry. And what do we usually snack on? Junk that's full of what? Insulin levels spike. Can you see this? Can you see the pattern now? Okay, next slide, please. And that concept is called insulin resistance, where the insulin and the cells that bring in that glucose, they're just not working on par with each other. and the cycle perpetuates, and then you're locked. Next slide, please. And insulin resistance is the road, it's the root cause of all these common Western diseases. It's the road to getting one of these, basically. Okay, next slide, please. But if you break it down, right, this is the amount of sugar that's released in the bloodstream, equivalent to teaspoons on common cereals. Sorry, lads. I know Asian lads like Cocoa Pops, but no more Cocoa Pops, man. I'm going to get rid of it. Next slide, please. This is a bit where you definitely don't like. Look at rice. It's a grain. It's natural. Look at potato, aloo. It's a starchy vegetable. It's natural. Nothing wrong with it, really. But it's just got tons of sugar in, equivalent. You digest it. It releases glucose. Huge. Would you put 10 teaspoons of sugar on your rice? You wouldn't, would you? Or 9 teaspoons on a potato? Never. You just wouldn't, would you? Okay, just bringing that. Now look right at the bottom. Look at broccoli or anything that's green. So there's next to nothing. Look at eggs. Wonderful. Meat, same. Just literally zero sugar. Fish, hardly any carbs. Okay, next slide, please. Just being aware is important. So then we have a choice. Which is the nicest? Which looks the nicest? The one on the right, isn't it? The red one, right? And you know, Sheikh Salim Durad, Hafidhahullah, he has a big majlis, doesn't he? He has a huge majlis, Sheikh Salim Durad, Hafidhahullah. And he's a sort of, he's an incredibly lovable individual, Sheikh Salim, Hafidhahullah. So one of the brothers was telling me in his majlis, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people in his majlis, there was 2 big platters, 2 huge trays. One had the pizzas, the junk and stuff like that, and the other had fruit and raw veg. So the one that had the pizza and the burgers and the junk and the chocolate, it was finished in no time. Didn't even get halfway. The one that had all the healthy stuff went round twice and still wasn't finished. But essentially, we have a choice. Which road am I going to go down? Next slide, please. But to help us decide, it's important to ask questions, and questions are really important because it challenges our notions, number one, and it causes self-reflection and increases the concept of self-discipline. And Quran questions us all the time. If you read Quran with tadabbur, you will see that Allah asks us questions over and over again to get us to think and work it out for ourselves. That's the nature of human being. They can figure out truth very. It's called fitrah. So ask yourself a couple of questions, because I don't know the answers, but you do. Why do you eat? Why do you eat? Do you eat to live or do you live to eat? They're 2 different things. You eat to live or live to eat? 2 different things. Are you eating because you're bored? Loads of people do that. Because food is so easily accessible, I'm bored, I'm going to eat. Do you eat because you're stressed? I don't like to call it comfort eating, I call it stress eating, because if you call it comfort eating, you're legitimizing it. It's all right, you're sad, keep eating, bro. It's just I call it stress eating. You eat because you're stressed. Are you eating because you're addicted? Really important question. 30% of diabetics are addicted to foods. So food addiction is underdiagnosed, underrecognized. There's a lot of work going on in the background, but it's an important question to have. Like what? And then what am I eating? And why am I eating what I eat? These are questions that's really worth asking. Then you'll figure it out, inshallah. Next slide, please. But the other question is, who's in control? For Ramadan, really important question. Who's in control, me or my nafs? Who's in control? And so if you want to make it easy for yourself, just have a diet that's rich in protein. Think meats, think egg, think fish. Yes, for breakfast as well. And that might be hard to stomach now, but I have fish for breakfast. It's absolutely fine. And then have tons of veg, salad, multicolored, really important. And then complex carbohydrates, which I'll break down, less so. And then have fruit, but less so. Have more veg than fruit because of the fructose and the sugar content in it. So have fruit. Don't have fruit, but more veg than fruit. Next slide, please. Eventually, the plate should look like this. You'll notice 2 things about this plate. Number one, it's flat. That's really important because we have mountain plates. It's true, bhai. It's true, isn't it? Like we're just like, oh, it's embarrassing. Like how much food can one eat? Remember the Prophet ﷺ said, it's in the Sahihain, that a mu'min eats with 1 stomach. The mu'min eats with 1 stomach. And we'll explore this a bit more. And what you do, you have so half is veg and fruit, and then salads, and then top right is protein, and then bottom right is your complex carbs. So next slide, please. And what do you drink with it, with your foods? What do you have to drink? Just water. The Messenger of Allah only drank two things, milk and water, and there's a reason for that. Water. Okay. So if you want, you're not too keen on meats, on the right hand side, they're your proteins. On the left hand side, obviously pork haram. But all of those are fine. They're the sort of foods you want to go for. Okay, don't worry, the slides will be online. Next slide. And what you do, you want to avoid, the good stuff, the good stuff. So simple carbs should only be in celebrations. Think weddings, his completion, whatever it is, right? Whatever you celebrate. That's when it should be, should be ingested. Eid, for example. But complex carbs, they're released over a longer period of time, so you feel less hungry. But they're the sort of stuff you wanna go for. Next slide, please. And then it gets to the point when I get to this far with my patients, the question they have is, okay, doctor, so what on earth do I eat? Like, what on earth do I? One guy, he allows me to tell his story. He's a Hindu patient, and he came to see me, and he was massive. His cholesterol was high. His blood pressure was high. He was nearly diabetic. And I said, look, and his diet was atrocious. He wasn't very devoted. He used to just eat anything, basically. So I said, bye, you're going to have a heart attack. And I went through his diet thing with him. He was like begging me, going, doctor, sir, please, what am I going to eat? There's nothing I can eat now, right? And I said, look, you've got to make these changes or else you're going to have a heart attack. So we put him on medication because he was in trouble. And then I said, come and see me in 2 to 4 weeks. He didn't come and see me. 3 months went by, and then he came to see me. I said, where have you been? He goes, you didn't hear? I said, no. He went on the internet and typed up this random Indian newspaper and goes, take a look at this. And my guy, he had a heart attack coming back from India. So when you go to India, what do you do? All night is maza, every night is maza, isn't it? You just eat what you want, jalebi, this, that, and the other, mithai. He said, I had a heart attack on the way back from India. But the plane had to be diverted back to India. He goes, you were right. I did. So we get to it, what do I eat? So let me give you a blueprint, and inshallah, hopefully you can use it for the rest of your life. So for Sahri, what you want to do is do it like this. Wake up well early for Sahri. But don't leave it last minute. Like, it's impossible to stomach some of these foods. If you're like waking up last minute and you're like rubbing the sleep off your eyes and you're like putting stuff in your mouth, you're not going to be able to stomach it. So wake up very early compared to what you're usually accustomed to. And the first thing you do is, even if it's just 2 rakats, just say Allah Akbar and start with 2 rakats of salah, just to get your body in motion and body moving. Engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and know that that period is blessed throughout the whole year. Every single night, Allah's rahmah descends to the lowest heaven, and Allah asks, who's there asking so I can give them? Who's there seeking forgiveness so I can forgive them? Who has a need? Every single night. It's a blessed time. So what that will do, that will get your body engaged in just movement and being awake and being able to stomach foods. Then what you do for Sahri, have a good one because the Prophet ﷺ said so. And whatever he says is enough for us. There's barakah in suhoor. So make sure you have one. Make sure you drink plenty of water. Avoid caffeinated drinks because they dehydrate you. They make you go to the toilet unnecessarily. Have plenty of water and have a protein-rich breakfast. If you want some ideas, I don't have any shares in these companies, but just Google Freshwell app. Scroll down halfway through, you'll see a 4-week meal planner. Okay, I'll give you everything, breakfast and evening meal as well. Freshwell app. Okay. Number 2. Michael Mosley, the late Michael Mosley, who passed away recently, he was a national treasure. I was so sad when he passed away. The work that he was doing was incredible. He has a website called Blood Sugar Diet. Just look on the recipe page, and you'll find loads of recipes. There's a sister in, I think, Huddersfield. She's got a website called Fitra Nutrition, and she's got loads of wonderful recipes on there. And essentially, it's breaking away from just having the staple toast and cereal, and being a bit more adventurous in your food choices. And then you'll find loads of recipes for suhoor. Like a favorite one of mine, scrambled egg or poached egg, smoked salmon, small amount of soft cheese, glass of water, green tea. Oh, voila, beautiful. For suhoor. And then what you do for iftari? What do you do in the masjid here? Ahsan. Do you know what they do in my masjid? Our Imam Sahib loves us so much. He gives us 10 minutes between azan and iqamah. And the dastakhan is full of all the good stuff, right? And so the masjid is rammed because everyone's getting free food, right? It's the only time in the year, Ilyas, when my son runs to the masjid and gets in the first stuff so he can get all the good stuff, right? And then this, so, but what people do, it's good you're doing that, because then what they do, they have their scran at the masjid, and then they go home and Ammijan or wife is cooked, and they have to eat again, because if you don't, get a tupper, right? And then, and so they have to eat properly as well. And then before Tarawih, they think, oh, I want to stand for 2 hours. I need to put something in my mouth, quickly before I go. And you come out of Tarawih, you bum, yes, so we just go to Chaiwala, let's get some scran. See, we've had 5 meals. How many? 5 meals, and we're supposed to only have 2. Okay, 5 meals, right? So the best thing, just good. 3 khajur, zamzam, pray your maghrib, aram se, with ease, pray maghrib. And pray 2 rakat sunan, and then 4 nawafil, and you've caught awabin. The one who prays 6 rakat after maghrib is the equivalent of 12 years of reward. And that's every day. Aram se, food's not going to go anywhere. You're not going to die. You're going to survive. You've done it for 12, 14 hours. Just engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then when you go and eat, just follow the prophetic pathway, which we'll talk about. But remember, follow a protein-rich diet. That's not no carb, because that's impossible, but low carb. Next slide. Essentially that. So I'll give you a couple of swaps, okay? Those of you that are accustomed to having rice, have broccoli rice or cauliflower rice. You can buy this. And once you mix it in with salan or your curry, you can't tell the difference. That whether you're having normal rice or cauliflower rice and broccoli has 0 carbs. So you don't have that carb spike. You don't have that insulin spike. Okay, what about roti and chapati? Okay, have it. But have a small amount. Have wholemeal and a tiny one, right? A small one, or half, or quarter, whatever it is, right? But do not have it every day. And just know this for us Asians, the chapati and dipping it into the salan and into the curry is just psychological. We just have to dip it in. So what do? Change your dip. Go and get a big lettuce and take a huge portion of lettuce out, like the leaf of it, and then just use that as your roti, as your dip. Try it. Loads of my friends and patients have tried it. Oh my God, I don't feel bloated. I don't feel heavy. I actually feel like I'm okay. I'm satiated. Or fine chop your vegetables and then mix it in with your son and have it with a spoon. Then you're avoiding rice. But if you do have rice, remember that slide where it's just a quarter? The smallest part of your food plate should be rice, tiny amount. Okay, instead of aloo, have sweet potatoes. A little bit better. Even better is cauliflower. But those 3 hacks have huge implications, benefits to reducing carbohydrate and reducing insulin as well. Next slide, please. And if you want to stay full, these are the top foods to have. Don't worry, these slides will be shared. And yeah, consider it. Fish for breakfast. I couldn't believe how easy it was to swallow, and even meat in Ramadan as well. Next slide, please. And remember, we talked about exercise, but if a human being doesn't sort out their diet, run all you want, you're not going to see any changes. And I put this in on purpose because people think if I go to the gym and just work it out, it ain't going to happen unless the diet changes. Next slide, please. But we'll finish here, inshallah. We'll go in 20 minutes. You don't need me. You don't need me to explain all this to you. Just cast attention to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To who? To the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was interesting what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Our ulama, they say that the prophets, they didn't have a timetable for food. There was no breakfast, lunch, dinner. This is my tea time. This is when I'm going to dip my biscuits. There was none of that. It was eat when I feel hungry. And they say the adat of the habits of the prophets is that they only used to eat once a day. And the habit of the awliya is that they eat twice a day. Now, I'm not going to tell you what they said about people who eat 3 times a day. But generally they say adatul anbiya once, awliya twice. But the Prophet was interesting, but the Prophet he had no wantonness for food. And this is important. Let me tell you why. The Prophet, his average timetable, any time of the year, he'd be up all night in Qiyamul Layl. Doing what? Making dua for who? Us. For his ummah. And once, Aisha radiallahu anha, she I saw the Prophet in a good mood. So I asked him, make dua for me. So the Prophet said, oh Allah, forgive Aisha her past, present, future sins, that what she's done in secret, that what she's done in public. And Aisha then said, I was so happy, I was so elated at that dua. She said, I laughed out so loud that my head fell into my lap. You know, you're so happy, you just like can't control your and then the Prophet ﷺ said, Aisha, it's making you happy, it's making you laugh. She said, how can it not? And he said, Inna hada la da'wati li ummati fi kulli salah. That dua, oh Allah, forgive you your sins, past, present, future, in secret and in public. He said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, I make that dua for every single one of my ummah after every single salah. Salawatu Rabbi wa salamuhu alayhi. So he was up all night. Then Fajr, he'd pray Fajr. After Fajr, he'd do Adhkar. Then he'd ask the Sahaba, Hal ra'a ahadan minkum ru'ya? Anybody seen a dream? And he used to interpret dreams. Then after that would finish, the children of Medina would come with their little buckets and the Prophet with water. And the Prophet would dip his blessed Mubarak hands inside and they'd take it home and use it for shifa for people who are unwell. Then the Prophet would see to the needs of people. And then he'd pray Ishraq. Then he'd see if there's anybody else who needs a hand with anything. Then he'd pray Duha, Bari Jasht, and then that would take him up to about 10 o'clock our time. Then he would go home. And then he would say, Hal indakum shay? Is there anything at home? Now look at the wording. Is there anything at home? Hands up. Who here has had that? Where they've gone home and asked their wife or their mum, is there anything at home? Has that ever happened to us? No, I know what you mean, bro. But we're not, we have cupboards full of food, right? And then often the wives of the Prophet would say, Ma indana shay, we don't have nothing, we don't have anything. And the Prophet would be like, okay, inni idhan la sa'im, I'm fasting. No kick. I mean, imagine if one of us came home like that. Bad day at work and we come home, any food? No. Yawm al-Qiyamah would happen, wouldn't it? Like, you're like, what? You just, inni idhan la sa'im. No wantonness for food. Abdullah ibn Umar, one of his students brought him something. He said, what's this? He goes, this is a digestive. What's a digestive? Does it help you digest your food? He said, bhai, I've not eaten to my fill for 12 years. For 12 years, I've not eaten to my full fill. And they asked him, why? He said, because I grew up with people who never did. And his father, Umar, the Sahaba, he goes, they never used to eat to their fill. That was the adat of the Sahaba. They never used to eat to their fill. Okay, next slide, please. Now, there's a story behind this famous hadith. You've heard the hadith of the third for the stomach? A third for food, a third for water, a third for... Okay, so why was this said? So when Khaybar was opened up, the Sahaba were poor. When Khaybar was opened up, they had a lot of spoils of war. One of the things that they received was food. The Khaybar was like a stockpile area. And so they received a lot of food. And the Sahaba who were accustomed to poverty, who hadn't experienced so much delicious food, they were like happy days. And they started eating, like they've never ate before. And a significant amount of Sahaba fell ill. And then the Prophet ﷺ said this to them, Ma mala'a ibn Adam wi'an sharran min batni. The son of Adam cannot fill a vessel worse than his stomach. Bihasbni ibn Adam luqaymat, in another narration, ukulat, just few luqma. Yuqimna sulba, that holds their back straight, gets the spine straight, in other words, able to function and stand. فَإِن كَانَ لَا مَحَا, if you can't do that, because that's hard. So luqaymat linguistically is 3 to 9 morsels. Luqma is a big morsel. Luqayma is a small morsel. And how did the Prophet eat? Show me, somebody. Like that. It's impossible to overeat when you're holding your food like that. So luqayma is like this. And that's why Umar radiallahu anhu would only have 9 morsels of food maximum with his meals because of this hadith. So if you can't do that, then 1/3 of food for your stomach is food, 1/3 is liquid, and 1/3 is air, so you can just breathe. Okay. Now, interestingly, how do we phrase them? Holistic naturopathic doctors of the past used to say, this is the essence of medicine, this hadith. This hadith is the essence of medicine. And in fact, some of the famous Arab doctors of the past, 1,000 years ago, would say, if humanity would follow this, there'd be no need for hospitals and pharmacists. Like the doctors and pharmacists would be unemployed because no one would fall ill. When medicine used to be taught in Baghdad, where the center of learning of the world was the Muslim world, a Christian medical student went to Baghdad to study medicine, and he read this hadith, and he said, Imam Ghazali quotes this in Ihya. He said, ما سمعت كلاما أعجب عن هذا عن قلة الطعام. I've not heard anything more amazing than this hadith about how to reduce your food intake. Now fast forward to 2020 when I started doing these talks. I was doing some colleagues at work, and one of the doctors, she asked me, she goes, your Prophet talks about health? I said, of course he does. She goes, what does he say? I mentioned this hadith to her, and she nearly fell off a chair. She said, if same statement, if the world follow this, we'd have no problems. Now look, these are two people 1,000 years apart, completely different generations, completely different echelons of time, but still both of them recognize the genius of the process. We look, listen to, and pay attention to everybody except who? Except the Messenger of Allah, salawatu rabbi wa salamu alayhi. And it's to our loss. Next slide, please. And then incorporate the sunnahs, because this is how you have blessings in your food. And we forgot this. Like simple things like washing hands, saying Basmillah, eating together. Some of the Sahaba came to Prophet ﷺ, a group of them, and they said, Ya Rasulullah, inna nahnu na'kul wa la nashba'. We eat, but we don't feel full. The Prophet ﷺ said, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَأْكُلُونَ مُتَفَرِّقِينَ. Maybe you're eating and you're not eating together, you're eating on your own. اجتمعوا على طعامكم. Why don't you eat together? Eat together as a group. وَاذْكُرِ اسْمَ اللَّهِ. Remember Allah when you make. Aisha used to say to her friends when they used to have food and there was no condiments, it was just plain food. Aisha would say to them, sisters, the best condiment that you can put on your foods is Hamdulillah. Just keep saying Alhamdulillah. I'm going to try it. Each time you eat, when you say Bismillah, you put it in your mouth. So eat with your hands, these fingers, and you put it in and say Bismillah. And then after you've swallowed it, you say Alhamdulillah. I guarantee you, the barakah, the blessings of that will prevent you from overeating. You'll feel full a lot more quicker. And how did the Prophet ﷺ, he sat on the floor, how did he sit when he ate? Anybody know? Somebody do it. Ahsan Habibi, that's one way. What's the other way? And the other, there are three. So they're the three ways. Most of the time it was like that. Now, those three, the reason why the Prophet ﷺ sat in those three ways is because if you do it properly and not have a slouch back, and you sit like this, the entire, so your GI tract, your gullet, your stomach, your intestines, are straight. Why is that important? We can tell when we're full. Whereas if you sat like this, or you sat on a table, or you're leaning over, or you can't tell when you're full. So there's a secret behind why the Prophet ﷺ used to do that. Next slide, please. And look at this. When I read this, I was frightened. The Aisha is one of the top 5 scholars of the Sahaba. Without her, so much of the deen would not have reached us, and so much of the Prophet's private life would not have reached us. Really important scholar of the Sahaba, and without her, we wouldn't have a lot of this deen. We wouldn't have. Allah reward her immensely. Radiallahu anha wa ardaha. She said, the first musibah, the first trial, tribulation, problem that the Sahaba had is that is that after the Prophet passed away, is that people started eating to their full. First musibah, because that wasn't something that was done at the time of the Prophet. And then she said, فَإِنَّ الْقَوْمِ people, لَمَّا شَبِعَتْ بُطُونُهُمْ سَمِنَتْ. When they start eating a lot, they become fat. Okay, why is that a problem? فَتَشَبَّعَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Then their hearts become hard. Why is that a problem? وَجَمَعَتْ شَهَوَاتُهُمْ. And then their desires just go wild. When I read this, I was like, this is tasawwuf. It is. That concept of self-discipline. Why is it important? Go backwards. How do you stop someone's caprice, nafs? How do you stop it from going wild and not staying within the hudud, the realms of what Allah wants us to stay in? Well, don't let your hearts go hard. Okay, how do you stop your hearts from going hard? Look after your physique. How do you look after your physique? Don't fill your stomach. Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu, Muhammad ibn Idris, Imam Shafi'i, he said, 16 years, 16 years I never ate to my fill. And he said, and the one time I did, I vomited. The one time I ate to my fill, I vomited. And then I realized something. When the first time I ate to my fill, I realized that it made me sleepy and I lost out on ibadah. It made me what? Sleepy, and I lost out on ibadah. He said, wisdom disappeared. My intellect became weak. And so he never did it again. So the concept of not eating, of not eating to your fill, The ulama have, documented through experience, that creates a sense of heightening or enlightening the intellect, bringing wisdom to the forefront, and helping with engaging with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you overeat, you just feel really sluggish. Like, don't we like after in Ramadan you have iftari and you just stuff yourself? Do you really want to go tarawih? The answer is no. You're like, you get me? Whereas following this path, you don't feel, bloated. You don't feel heavy. You feel like, okay, I've eaten enough for me to keep my back straight. But this is the pathway. Next slide, please. And one easy way of doing it, like how do you enter this zone? One easy way of doing it is spending more time reflecting, tadabbur. That's what Allah demands from us. More time reflecting, more time, asking questions like, where did I come from? What am I doing here? Where am I going to go? Like, what's my maqsad? What's my ultimate purpose? Whereas, spending hours on devices, doom scrolling, looking at nonsense, and half the time it's like, what did I just do? I just wasted 1 hour doing what? You'll figure out how one needs to be. And that concept we talked about at the beginning, self-discipline, will enter. Ramadan, engaging with the Quran is really, really important, but take it to another level. Honestly, take it to another level. Like, Ramadan every day can't be the same. There was one sister, and she wanted to hifz, and she had kids to look after. 140 days she finished her hifz. 140 days she became a hafiz of Quran. There was one brother during first lockdown who got bored, and he said, in 9 months I finished the Quran, memorized the Quran. I got bored. Oh, what's that? It's a Quran. Let's see. Right, 9 months. There was one brother in Harun Berry. He came to Hazrat Yusuf Rahimahullah, and he said, Hazrat, can you listen to my first sabak? Hazrat Rahimahullah said, I'll listen to every sabak on one condition. He goes, what? He goes, learn 1/4 of a juz a day. Learn how much? 1/4 of a juz a day. Hazrat said, first day he did a quarter, second day he did a quarter, third day he did a quarter. He said he read every day, he read sabak to 90 days he finished the Quran. That's how you use your time. These people weren't, and then take it to another level. So when if you want to enjoy Tarawih, and really make it, worthwhile, and you're not just daydreaming, when you memorize the Quran, you can follow the Imam. I take it to another level the year after. Learn Arabic. The first time, what really convinced me when I witnessed a group of young Arab brothers, and they were in Tarawih, and stuff like we do this, don't we? We see people who might not, have a dari, they might not have well libas, and we think that they're, distant, but there's some people who their hearts are a lot more purer than us on the outward who are practicing on the outward. There's some Arab brothers, no dari, no libas, but in Tarawih they were really weeping, weeping at what they were, because they could understand, and their iman, Allah, so much greater than us. You get me? So take it to another level where you learn Arabic and then you're in real time following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. That's how you do it. Whereas if the concern is, what am I going to eat today? Where should we go today? What am I going to buy now to eat? What am I going to buy to wear? Oh, this thing. Oh, guess he's in there. That's not the way of the process. It's not the way of the process. It's not the way of our traditions, this age. Whereas entering this zone, it starts with food. Once you have control of the Salaf, they used to say, whoever can control their stomach has control over their nafs. Really simple. Really simple. Next slide, please. And then we'll finish with these two statements. So this is a famous statement of the Prophet. The intelligent one is not the doctor, is not the accountant, is not the dentist, not the lawyer, not the entrepreneur, billionaire. So there's only 5 careers in our culture, isn't there? I'll start you off. What does A stand for? In our culture, A stands for accountant, B stands for barrister, C stands for consultant doctor, D stands for dentist, E stands for engineer, F stands for failure. Yeah, that's right. That's it. We stop there, don't we? But the intelligent one, look definitions. Our definitions of of reality is from Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and no one and nothing else. Prophet defined intelligence. The intelligent one, al-kayyisu man dana nafsa, subdues his nafs. Wa amila lima ba'da al-maut. Nothing to do with this world. He does actions for the akhirah. So he build for the akhirah. And we're talking about building houses. I want to have a nice house. I want to extend my house and have this flashy. So I have no concern for that. I'm going to build my mansions in akhirah. Okay? So they work for the akhirah. That's the intelligent one. That's the intelligent one. And ask, we talk about questions. How long has the Prophet ﷺ been at rest in the state of barzakh? There's no disagreement, is there? There's no ikhtilaf. 1400 years. That's a long time, isn't it? When is Yawm al-Qiyamah? No one knows. You and I could be in that grave for another 1400. That's a long time. That's a long time, isn't it? To be all on your own. And there's nothing that's going to come to save you except what? Your actions, righteous deeds. And they'll come in the form of angels. I'm your Quran, I'm your Salah, I'm your Sadaqah, I'm your Zakat, I'm your good character, you did khidmah for so and so, this is your reward. And then Akhirah is either heaven or hell. There's no in between. Right? That's it. The soul, remember this point, the soul is eternal, it never dies. But the soul has a journey as well. Before we came here, we were in Alam al-Arwah. Then mother's womb, now we're here. You have a 1 in a million chance of living up to over 100 years old. Nobody in this country lives past 120. It's not a long time compared to the time in the barzakh. Agreed? In other words, the window of the journey soul here is the shortest, and the window is small. So the Prophet ﷺ was encourages that you got to be intelligent about this. Work for the akhirah. And there's a saying from the ulama: the matters of this world, لا تعطيها أكثر مما تستحق. Don't give matters of this world more than it deserves. Don't. And the Prophet ﷺ defines the stupid one, wal ajiz, the foolish one, the stupid one, short-sighted one. Man atba'a nafsahu hawaha, just lets his lower self just follow the caprice and desires wherever it wants to take him or her. And then watamanna ala Allah, and has false hopes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah he or she has a standing with Allah. That's ghurur. That's delusional. That's delusional. But how do you get to that state where you subdue your nafs? First is food. You control food, develop self-discipline, you control your nafs. Next slide, please. And then we'll end with this. Sufyan ibn Uyayna is one of the most celebrated scholars of hadith. He lived till he was 91 years old, rahimahullah. He did Hajj 70 times. And every time he went Hajj, he used to raise his hands, Allah, call me back. 70 times. On the 70th time, he said to his friends, I can't ask Allah. He's given me 70. I'm not going to ask Allah for any more. And then the Rajab, next year, he passed away. Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Once when he was in Hajj, what time is Maghrib? We got time. Once when he was in Hajj, some young students noticed that Sufyan ibn Uyayna is here. He's a muhaddith. So while he's walking through Mina, this young student comes up to him and says to him, Shaykh, narrate some hadith to me. He said, I'm in Hajj, I'm engaging with Allah, so maybe after Hajj you can come to see me. So the student was like persisting. You got some people who they don't understand the concept of this is my space. That concept of, you're a bit too close, bro. That sort of thing, right? So he's like rubbing shoulders with Sufyan ibn Uyayna, saying, no, come on. So Sufyan ibn Uyayna, he just gives him a little nudge. And back then there were no pathways, it was hills and valleys. So this young student, he fell down this valley and he's like rolling, right? And everybody's shouting, he's killed him. Sufyan ibn Uyayna killed him. Sufyan ibn Uyayna ran down. And he's looking at the guy and saying, he's fine. He's a few scratches. And then he's like nudging him. He says, look, wake up, bhai, because these people up there are accusing me that I've murdered you. So the young boy, who's pretending to be dead, his eyes are closed. He opens one eye and he says to Sufyan ibn Uyayna, rahimahullah, narrate 10 hadith for me and I'll wake up. Look at that talab for the hadith of the Prophet. But he said the intelligent one is not the one who just knows what's right or wrong. That's not intelligence. Intelligent one is the one who can see or knows something is good and then they go towards it. And then they see something is wrong and they stay away from it. Does that make sense? And that's where self-discipline, we talked about at the beginning, self-discipline, that's when it comes in. So you don't need me. Engage in, stop, turn phones off, turn screens off, read sit in majalis of ulama and learn. And when in your own time, when you have you time, read the life of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba. And like Hazrat Yusuf used to say to me, that if we don't compare our lives with the life of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, he said the nuqsan that it does to you, he said you can't put words to it. It's as if you're on the path, but you've actually missed the boat. You're getting it all wrong. Allah give us tawfiq, inshallah. Like I said, just absorb what I said. I know I've probably offended a lot of people, but sometimes the doctor needs to give you an injection to bring benefit to you. We'll stop there, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika.
Kita belajar proses dari yang lain, dan sampai mau ada dengan amal kita berhati kita kita pasti doa dengan insyaallah kita kalau kita insyaallah itu boleh kasih boleh insyaallah